Should we start right into it, or do you want to do like because sometimes we do the preamble a little bit.
Yeah, whatever.
My only preamble that I was like thinking about it on the drive over here.
Yeah.
R.I.P. Peanut the squirrel.
Okay, I don't even know what that's about. I saw something about Peanut the squirrel, but I don't even really know what's going on.
Kind of making it into like the new Harambe.
Yes, I saw something about that.
Yeah, the reason being is that basically Peanut the squirrel is like basically this guy got a squirrel and domesticated the squirrel, and it's kind of cute. He makes like Instagram and YouTube videos, 2 million followers or something on average.
And someone shot Peanut.
No, what happened is the state of New York went, you're not allowed to have a squirrel as a pet. So we're going to send a bunch of people with guns to your house to grab your squirrel. And then they claim that the squirrel bit them. And they're like, oh, that's evidence of rabies. And then they euthanize the squirrel.
Is that real?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened.
It's freaking America. What the heck? You can have a squirrel?
Well, it's just, there's state-to-state rules on what kind of pets. Like in Texas, you can have a zebra. They don't care. You can have anything you want. Yeah. In New York, you can't have a squirrel or raccoon or anything like that.
But like, where was he in New York?
He was in, it was in New York State. I don't know.
Was he in Manhattan? Because I could see maybe his landlord having an issue.
I don't see what if I was your landlord and I popped in there and you're like, wait, how many followers? I'd be like, fine, whatever. Do it. You seem like you know what you're doing.
I guess so. But it's still a rodent inside your house. But I mean, like, if you're like in upstate New York and you have a squirrel hanging out,
you should be careful here, Chance. You're like getting into the territory of, I think we should have shot Harambe. You know?
No, I'm saying Peanut the squirrel did nothing wrong.
Yes, which is the consensus on the internet as well.
Unless the dude, even if the landlord had a problem. Now I'm getting riled up about Peanut the squirrel.
This is what the whole internet is doing.
Because it's like,
I think last second Trump should have just been like, Peanut the squirrel, what a great loss. That is every state going red right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was the mess. Welcome to the Forest Green Podcast. We're not here to talk about Peanut the squirrel, unfortunately. R.I.P. Peanut, but also R.I.P. Joseph Stalin.
Another culturally significant death.
That's Harambe, Peanut, Joseph Stalin.
Wow.
Leonard
Leonard Nimoy.
Beria. What was his first name? How do you say it?
It's Beria.
Beria.
What was his first name? Was a weird one.
Something with an L.
It was like
Leonard. It's Leonard.
Lenov or something.
Beria.
Sounds
evil enough. We just watched The Death of Stalin. Mm-hmm. Yes, it is a comedy film, which was produced a few years ago.
2018.
And it takes place in...
Sorry, the TV behind Raph says 2018, but Google says 2017, so...
Well, maybe it was like produced in 2017 or something, and maybe it just got onto Amazon Prime in 2018. Maybe. But I remember watching it via streaming after it had come out. I'd seen trailers, I'd hoped to get it in theaters, but we didn't get the chance. It takes place in 1953, around the death of Stalin, as the title suggests. And what the committee of the Soviet Union was doing after he died, how the power shifted. But instead of it being, a boring bureaucratic drama, it's comedy. As something like this kind of suggests. There is something to this, and, I'll bring in another reference here, because the other movie that we were considering for this November Remembrance Day special, like we like to do here on the podcast, a history movie usually is what we like to do.
Yeah, I would say this is loosely related to Remembrance Day, but it's in the zeitgeist kind of.
The other movie I had in consideration was Jojo Rabbit. And the thing that these two movies have in similarity is that they're taking something dark and quite horrific and making light of it, which I think is a very useful tool that humans have. Yeah,
I would say the difference between Jojo Rabbit and The Death of Stalin is like Jojo, it doesn't feel serious until the last bit of the movie. Yeah. When like the Allies are invading Berlin. Yeah.
Well, even that is actually quite hilarious.
It's hilarious, but it's a little dark too.
Yeah.
But And like it takes a shift when spoilers, a certain character dies, the tone shifts. But before that in the movie, it's like pretty silly, pretty lighthearted.
Yeah.
But the death of Stalin feels like it's hilarious the whole time,
but it's also very dark.
Dark the whole time.
Because it's the moments of comedy that we get in it are from the characters acting out, from how much pressure they have on them to behave and perform
the weird
in a certain way.
Social pressure that exists in a system like the Soviet Union is just bizarre.
Let's paint a picture of what's going on here.
Yeah.
It's Moscow, Russia, in the 1950s, under the power of Joseph Stalin.
Mm-hmm.
And the NKVD.
The secret police.
Not so secret, really, to be honest. Yeah, but they're out there in their blue caps. And when they show up, they're driving around. They got lists. They get signed off every day. And they drive around town, picking the people up on those lists and murdering them, imprisoning them, often torturing and doing other horrible things to those people. And it could be anybody on the lists. If you sneezed when someone said Joseph Stalin, you were on the list.
Yeah.
It's pretty horrific. And oftentimes you're captured, taken, tortured, and whether or not the people were actually guilty of anything, you were pressured and tortured until you confessed other names.
Yeah.
And then those people would be added to lists and then captured and tortured. It's like the NKVD was kind of just creating work for themselves, because they are, after all, a bureaucratic institution.
And the film almost makes fun of that, or does make fun of that, in like the way that they're trying to find a doctor, and there's no good doctors
because they either killed or imprisoned all the good doctors.
Yeah.
Because quote unquote they would have been the ones who would have poisoned Stalin. It's the common problem that the Soviet Union had, or any communist society. You can't be too good at your job. Because then you stick out. You can't be too bad because then you stick out. So you have to find some median level of mediocrity to continue living at. You have the information in front of you. Who's the director?
Directed by Armando Iannucci. I've heard that name before.
Armando Iannucci. Do anything else that we know?
You've heard of Alan Partridge?
We can kind of go down the cast list too.
Nothing. Clinton, his struggle with dirt.
Clinton and his struggle with dirt
is a satire by Armando Iannucci, from 1998.
That's so funny, is that like a lot of political satires just feel tame now in comparison. Today, we happen to be recording on the day of the U.S. election.
And relating to U.S. election, he also did Veep. You ever watch that show?
Veep. It's
I've never watched it, but it's with Julia Louis-Dreyfus from Seinfeld. She plays the VP in that show. So starring Steve Buscemi as our main character. He's so good in it too.
The film follows Nikita Khrushchev, who's always been famous to me as he's one of the principal negotiators during the Cold War, because he's in charge of the Soviet Union at the time. And this is kind of the story of how he came into power. If you are not familiar with the name, you may be familiar with the Soviet leader who had this giant birthmark on his bald head. And
Mikhail Gorbachev.
Mikhail Gorbachev. Is that the one?
That's the guy with the...
That's the birthmark guy. Okay, so the guy...
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
The guy before him was Brezhnev, I think. And then the guy...
I think so.
The guy before him was Nikita Khrushchev. And then technically the guy before him was Georgy.
Malikov.
Georgy Malikov.
Let me look this up. Secretary General.
A list of So, to give some background here, in the Soviet Union, because it's a communist society, you're not supposed to have a single guy in charge. But they needed to have some form of organization, so obviously they have a committee, and the committee is supposed to vote. Well, then the highest chair in this committee, the person who's officially kind of the chairman, is the Secretary General, which is kind of a funny name to give yourself, because it almost sounds like an assistant's position, even though it is the chief position, or commander-in-chief of the Soviet Union. You also had a vice chairman, which at the time that Joseph Stalin was in charge, his vice chairman was Beria. Beria was the leader of the NKVD, our secret police that we're talking about.
A nasty, nasty man.
Yeah, he's probably one of history's worst. Easily.
Yeah, and he goes on... People don't talk about him.
No.
Lavrenti Beria.
Lavrenti, yeah. Now, it's kind of worth mentioning, and a little bit of a note here, that when we think about history's greatest villains, people always put Hitler at the very top.
Yeah.
And we never give enough credit to Stalin, despite the fact that Stalin was, proportionally worse.
Numbers-wise.
Numbers-wise.
Yeah. I would say we put more weight on Hitler because of the ethnic cleansing part.
Yeah. Which is, again, it's not even something that is unique to Hitler to do ethnic cleansing.
It's not unique.
And also, Stalin also did ethnic cleansing.
Yeah. It's like the mechanized industrial ethnic cleansing of Nazi Germany.
Which is interesting. Because it's almost like the Russians did factually kind of the same thing, just sloppier. Yeah. And over longer periods of time.
It is interesting, like in the movie, because like a lot of the bureaucracy and stuff is portrayed as a little sloppy. Like the Soviets aren't worried about taking out the wrong guy.
No.
You know?
Actually, Beria had a famous quote where he said, "Show me the man and I'll show you the crime."
Right.
Because the point would be that, like, you could pick anybody out of crowd, innocent or not, they will find something to charge him with, and they'll throw him in gulag for a reason. It doesn't really matter what it is.
And it's kind of contrasted with, like, in our culture, the idea that, like, the Nazis, like the Gestapo and the SS are, like, accurate.
Precise.
Yeah.
There's a really interesting podcaster, history podcaster who's become kind of famous for some controversy recently because he did a podcast about Winston Churchill, kind of showing here's kind of the villainous aspects of Winston Churchill, and perhaps as you know, this is the controversial part. He goes, what if Churchill was the real villain of the Second World War?
Right.
One of the things that Daryl Cooper points out is that he says the Holocaust, the concentration camps, their executions and all that, was actually the quote-unquote humane solution that the Nazis came up with.
Right.
Because they were taking hundreds of thousands of prisoners, and they wouldn't be able to feed them. So their choices were let these prisoners starve to death or find some quicker way to get rid of them.
Yeah, I mean...
Which, again...
You could look at it that way.
This is not a defense, but it's an interesting nuance to point out.
Yeah.
In the case of the Soviet Union, when you have a giant failing state that is virtually constantly in a state of failure, you only squeeze out progress out of it by literally forcing people. It's like people are dying at a constant rate, and the only way to make them progress in any direction is actually to kill more of them, which is kind of like a very monstrous way to look at a bureaucracy, but that's what it became. And in terms of the Soviet Union, like in that same way, people are starving to death. So is it almost a humane solution to send them to gulags?
No.
No, not really, no. Maybe fix the country, that would have been a thing, but that's not an option. You must obey what Marx wrote down, or what then Trotsky said, which then got scratched out, and whatever Stalin said, that was the rule.
I think when you're a communist or a Marxist or a Leninist or a Stalinist, potentially you look at people like dissidents and like fascists, and you look at them as like a roadblock to the greater good.
Yeah.
Because you're working towards, in theory, the greater good of society. You know, that's like the idea, is you're trying to get to utopia. And they're roadblocks. So in your mind, you're like, well, they're stopping. It's all about like, it's all about survival of the fittest. So they're stopping progress. So we need to get rid of them, right?
It's an interesting other nuance to point out that in the history of communism, Karl Marx always intended for communism to lead to a global revolution, a global utopia. Yeah. And in the early days of the communist revolution, Vladimir Lenin and Leon Trotsky also supported that cause. Yeah. And then the third popular voice there was Stalin. And then power flipped really quickly after the communists took over. Lenin died. And then Trotsky was basically run out of the country by Stalin, who took over the whole committee. Because Stalin's vision for Russia was that it should be the Soviet Union that is a communist empire, and we're going to draw borders, and that's going to be it. Yeah. because we don't actually care about all these other people.
Mm-hmm.
We don't think it's going to be able to work on a globalist level. If we're constantly fighting wars to expand the communist revolution, we'll never be able to actually manage our interior.
Yeah.
And then I think his theory gets confirmed, because when World War II happens, they clearly come up against, the fascist forces of Germany and the expanding of the Nazi Empire, and here's a border of people who don't agree with you at all. And then beyond that, when you're sitting back in World War II and you just hear about what the Americans did to the Japanese,
right?
And you're like, oh, I guess it was a good idea not to fight that war in the end. So then they just draw this line around the Soviet Union and they say, this is what we got.
Yeah.
And it just becomes, this is our death machine.
Yeah.
So back to this movie.
Right.
Stalin, the leader of the death machine, dies, has a heart attack. Pianist sends him an angry comment on YouTube.
Yeah. I wonder if that's real. I imagine a lot of this movie's made up, but I have a feeling it follows the general scheme
of things. Like, if we're going to point out the history plot points here, Stalin gets a heart attack, the committee convenes, they decide on things together, eventually they have a funeral of Stalin, they decide on... I'm saying they decide because the drama here is that we're following Khrushchev running around to the other committee members and trying to convince them.
And everybody is scheming the whole time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because they either want power or they want to be protected from the power.
Yeah.
The deputy to Stalin, Georgy, is next in line to become general secretary. But the person who secretly holds all the power is Beria. Because Beria, again, still runs the NKVD. He's the propaganda... Well, not the propaganda. He's the guy who holds all the secrets.
Yeah.
He has the lists.
Yeah.
He can accuse anybody of anything and make, like I said, make the crime fit. And he's a genuinely terrifying figure.
Yeah, he's cunning. He's devious.
Yes. Yeah.
Despicable.
So when power is shifting and you're looking around for who the biggest threat is, it's so obviously him.
Yeah.
Then you have a very... dangerous decision to make. Do I side with the potential to get rid of this guy, or for my own safety do I just get behind him in line? Well, the thing that's dangerous about that is that it doesn't matter how loyal you are. Eventually they'll make the crime fit.
Yeah.
One of the characters in it, Molotov, whose name is now famous for the bottle of the flaming bottle.
His
cocktail. He is super loyal to communism as the ideal. He's very loyal to Stalin, and he still ends up on a list.
Yeah. He was actually the signatory on the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, which is when Germany and Russia agreed to split up Poland.
Right.
And they agreed to not attack each other for 10 years.
Yeah, it's a fun fact. Hitler and Stalin were friends for a minute.
Yeah, well, they both said they were friends to each other.
I think, whatever.
Allegedly, Stalin was distraught when he discovered Hitler was invading.
Yeah.
He was like, how could he do this?
So we're both leaders of great death machines. So I'm sure he was pretty upset.
Yeah.
I wonder how Mussolini felt, because the whole thing would have been like, Mussolini's like, we're losing the war, this is not going good, and then he goes in a room with Hitler, and Hitler's just methed out and yells at him for an hour, and then he's like, I guess we're still fighting the war.
I listened to a podcast about Hitler's rise to power recently, and apparently when Hitler invaded Austria, and Austria just said, yep, we'll become part of you, he sent a letter to Mussolini to be like, hey, don't intervene, because Mussolini had his own visions on Austria, and he's like, don't intervene. If you don't intervene, I will be forever in your debt. Mussolini sends him a letter like, yep, no, all good. So they march in, they take Austria, then Hitler sends Mussolini another letter with just lavishing him with compliments and thanks. Thank you so much, you are my eternal friend. And Mussolini sent Hitler a letter back that was like, I received your letter, thanks. It's super awkward.
KK, thanks.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Interesting people.
Yeah. So we follow them basically through this historical plot points of now they're all scheming and plotting to see if they can get on the same page to vote that Beria is indeed guilty of the things that they'll accuse him of, which again, it's interesting that they do have a list of crimes.
Yeah.
And Beria also says, I have a list of everything you guys did.
Yeah.
And they're just really trying to get consensus to accuse each other of things. It's that they're all guilty. They're all really bad guys.
They're all bad people.
Yeah. So they're all just trying to get on the same page of let's accuse one of us, because as soon as we're all on the same page, that guy is we're able to punish him.
Yeah, Barry is also not just like a random scapegoat. He is
like the worst of them.
The worst one and the most dangerous one.
Yes. Yeah. Like we're saying, because the NKVD could show up at your door. Just like Molotov, as we were talking about. One of the plot points of this is that his wife, Galina, was taken by the NKVD and accused of being a traitor, despite the fact that she probably did nothing, and kept by Beria. And then they told Molotov that they killed her, so that they have this little thing over their head. And that's one of the ways that we see that Beria is very cunning in the way that he's running the show. Eventually, they all get consensus, and they get the consensus and ally of the Zhukov. Yeah. Zhukov. Yeah. Russian names.
Yeah, I know.
Field Marshal Zhukov.
Yeah.
Who's like this World War II hero who
legendary.
Became the Soviet leader, the general of the Soviet army, basically, the big dude. And as soon as he sides with them, he goes, we can use my army and basically do a little coup.
Yeah, because as soon as Stalin died, Beria sent out the order that that all Russian soldiers in Moscow guarding whatever would be replaced with NKVD.
Yes.
So Zhukov has wants to get his back, you know.
Yeah, that's like you want to annoy someone immediately by showing disrespect to them. This is it's an interesting move because his immediate thought is, okay, the general secretary has just died. We need to secure the city, and I want my guys to secure the city. It's like a show of power, because his next move, Beria, was to kind of flip the script to turn him from, instead of being the chief tormentor, to suddenly he is the chief. He's the nice guy, because his immediate motion, let's release all the prisoners from the last 3 days, the people who freshly will remember this mercy, and all the people who just got their families taken away, return to them. And now look at Barry, he's a nice guy, because one of the number one things that you need in the communist revolution, and really in any government, is public support. To be a populist gets around. Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people will be examining the recent history of things and going, well, Donald Trump got to where he was and got to the support that he got politically because he managed to find populist appeal.
Yeah, I don't think that's a controversial.
Not at all.
No, yeah.
No. And, if we look back in ancient Rome, Julius Caesar did the same thing.
Definitely.
Yeah. 100%.
Unfortunately, to lump people in the same group, Hitler, he did that too.
Well, it's really funny. It's like one of the things that they recently said about Donald Trump is that he held a Madison Square rally.
Right.
Just like the Nazis.
Yeah.
Also, every Democratic president
every
has also done that.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
So it's like you can really selectively draw your lumps.
Yeah.
But anyway, eventually they all managed to get on the same page. And during Stalin's funeral, where, as Zhukov said, the army's all here, they all have their guns. Now is the perfect time.
Yeah.
They kick the NKVD out of the Kremlin. They capture Beria.
Yeah.
Kind of like in a boardroom decision.
Yeah, it's like a full-on military coup.
Yeah. It's funny, at the beginning of that meeting, he's just sitting down. He's like, whatever, we're going to pass this motion and whatever. And then suddenly it rapidly turns on him. And then the army captures him. They try him immediately, sentence him to death. Yeah. Again, he's already guilty of some pretty heinous things. Yeah. So it's really easy to just read off the crimes. Yes. You were sentenced to death. Take him outside, shoot him in the head. Yeah. That's it. And that's that.
Yeah.
So these are the historical plot points. What's in between here is the comedy of forcing these people in a pressure cooker and just we get an amazing scene in the very beginning of the Moscow radio recording this concerto.
Yeah.
And they're panicking because they just got a phone call from Stalin and he told them to call back 17 minutes later. And they're debating 17 minutes from when we picked up the phone or 17 minutes from when we put down the phone.
Yeah, or 17 minutes from when he said, call me in 17 minutes.
It's a genuine panic.
Yeah.
and then they figure out that they don't have it recorded, so now they need to cajole everyone back into their seats, get the concerto to play again. The composer fainted, so we need to get the nearest one and drag him out here to do it. And it's just this genuine sense of panic of, if we don't get this right, he's going to kill us all. We're going to look like traitors. We're going to get added to a list. And even the NKVD, you can tell that these are guys who are relishing a little bit in their power, because he shows up as like, oh, I'm going to note this delay. Not like it's making him look any better.
No.
To a certain degree, if you're in the NKVD, you're not safe either.
No. Well, he says, this delay has been logged. And then when he brings it to Stalin's like, what did you do, friggin' walk here? And slams the door in his face.
Which I feel like Stalin's never happy to receive anything. No. So it's like, you're not going to get anything good out of him. But it's interesting, it's like, even Beria, you see him talking to one of the NKVD guys, but like, because he stuttered. What's your name? That's a terrifying...
Simonov.
Yeah. And he's joking about him stuttering the whole time. He sentences him to death, basically. It was just a terrifying... Because, like, when you're in the Nazis, if you're Waffen SS, you're fine. There's no way anything's going to turn on you.
Right.
Because you're Waffen SS. You went through a selection process. They're like, you're perfect. If you're a German soldier in uniform, you really have to mess up before they turn on you. There was a certain loyalty among the Third Reich. I mean, at the very top, there was trepidation, especially in the earlier years, of Hitler trying to figure out, okay, who's loyal to me and who's not. But in the later years of the Nazi Party, the people at the top were like a gang. They were fine.
Well, I think there would have been competition like we saw in the movie, where they were all competing for the second spot. Who was going to take over when the Führer kicks the can,
Yeah, there was definitely that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, if we're talking comparatively, your odds of getting stabbed in the back by communists versus Nazis.
Yeah. I suppose, yeah.
Communists probably way worse, as we see there. There's nobody, like, none of the guys in Inglourious Bastards are like, one of these guys is going to turn on me the whole time.
Well, yeah, I mean... Hitler took care of that early on.
Yeah.
That
did his purges real quick. He did also use the Waffen-SS as his secret police. But the Waffen-SS were geared towards finding people who were confirmed to be dissenters. Because they genuinely believed, like, and I'm not saying that the communists didn't genuinely believe it either, but they genuinely believed, if you are a pure, innocent German soul, I don't want to hurt you. But the communists were incentivized to, I need to pick a name now, otherwise they're going to think I'm a traitor.
Right.
And that was the constant. That's even a thing that happens today in North Korea. Is they gather everyone into the square, and you have to confess a crime, or you have to confess that you saw someone else do a crime.
Brutal.
Yeah. So it's pretty rough. But then, the moments of comedy. I'm going to go down a few that stuck out to me, and you're welcome to pop in here with your own.
Well, I would like to first just preface this with, like, we'll describe these scenes and we'll chuckle, but you got to watch the movie. It's so good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh my god. Yeah, just to experience this as well.
Yeah, go for it.
I think we were both like giggling when we were watching the musicians already panic.
Yeah.
Because again, I think one of the things that makes this movie so excellent is that everybody playing it in the roles is like, well, most of them have British accents, which makes the humor like a little bit...
Right.
I think it suits the Russian dry humor as well.
Yeah.
Because they're being like mean to each other all the time.
Yeah.
So seeing a lot of British actors, especially like playing Molotov, I think it was Michael Palin. He was one of the Monty Python.
From Python, yeah.
Steve Buscemi and the guy who played Georgie was... The guy who played Georgie was...
Jeffrey Tambor.
Jeffrey Tambor from Arrested Development, who's excellent in that role.
Yeah. You got Jason Isaacs as Zhukov.
Who's awesome.
Yeah.
One of my favorite characters, easily.
Yeah. Rupert Friend as Vasily Stalin.
Yeah, which I thought was really funny because at the time that I watched it, I was like, his previous role was Agent 47, the hitman.
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah.
Which is a much more serious role than what he played here with Vasily.
Who else do we got here? Tall Doctor. The doctors were hilarious.
Yeah, they were.
All right, let me get on IMDb.
How old are you? 29?
Yeah, it was that. How old are you? I'm old. No, you're not. You're not even a person.
The first moment that I that got a genuine laugh out of me is the two soldiers who were stationed outside of Stalin's door. They're supposed to stand there as guards until they're relieved, and they're left standing there the whole time until they're executed. And it's really funny that, like, you hear Stalin has his heart attack, thump, and one soldier goes to the other, is like, should we go in there and check it out? The other guy goes, should you shut the fuck up? Because I don't want to get in trouble.
Yeah.
But it does such a good job of establishing, like, nobody wants to step out of line. Even in the early scenes of the film, we're watching Khrushchev explain to his friends, you just have your wife write down everything you said. That way in the morning, you'll know everything you're dealing with.
Totally.
Yeah. Which is very interesting that, like, you have to take these precautions. Don't tell Stalin the same joke twice. If he doesn't think you're funny, you're going to get added to the list.
Terrifying.
And then, I wonder if they ended up with a lot of, like, if funny people en masse were killed in Russia. Just for trying their luck with the jokes.
Probably.
Yeah.
Speaking of funny people, I've got Simon Russell Beale. He plays Beria. And
can I see a picture of him in his non-Beria costume, or does he look exactly the same?
He looks like a different person.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I imagine that would have been a fat suit or something.
And a bald cap. There he is.
Wow, that looks like an entirely different person. He looks way less evil.
He looks like a friendly dude.
Another funny moment. Anything with Zhukov on it was it had me really laughing. It was a great kind of disposition to be like, if you want to be not noticed, you play a humble role. This is an interesting tactic that I kind of saw the characters in the film doing. If you want to be not noticed, if you want to slip by, you're kind of humble the whole way through. Right? You don't make yourself known. You don't say mean things to people. You just be like, oh, should we do this? Is this the next order of business? Should we do that? And you kind of kowtow all the time.
Yeah.
But as soon as we see Zhukov coming, he doesn't care what anybody thinks. It's like he's answering only to Stalin himself, and Stalin himself is dead.
Yeah.
So Zhukov is like, you're all nobodies to me.
Yeah.
I'm the hero. I punched Hitler or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
He's got like 20 medals on his chest. Just the moment he walks in, he's just joking around with everybody. Doesn't care. He punches Stalin's son.
Yeah.
Like he has no restraint. Oh, whoops.
Sorry. That's me.
It's one of the things that instantly makes him likable. And then the other thing too is that, like, you notice that, you know, all these guys are joking and they're dissing each other all the time.
Yeah.
Constantly trying to get the better of each other. They're almost like, it's despicable behavior to watch these guys who are supposed to be the committee of their beloved nation.
Yeah.
And they're always trying to pull the rug out from under each other. They're always putting each other down. And then, like, when you see them turn on each other, the way to get the best of them is actually show, actually, I have the most balls. I'm the bravest of all of you. It's like, there's a scene where Khrushchev is just finished talking to this pianist.
Yeah.
The one who sent Stalin a mean note.
Yeah.
And causing his heart attack. And he's walking out, and these two of the other guys, the Minister of Defense and the Labor Minister, they're like going back and forth. They're like, oh yeah, did you have a good time in there with your girlfriend or whatever? And it just turns out it's like, you two clowns only have the one joke between you. Go work on your material. It's like, instantly shut them down.
Yeah.
And it was like, that's the way to do it. You just have to have them. And you see Beria kind of doing it in the beginning. Is that Beria's jokes are all very mean. Yeah. And when he starts doing that, like, you can't say anything back because that's Beria. If you say something he doesn't like, he's gonna kill you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man. Yeah, and I would say the way they portrayed him is like, the way they portray the situations that he is in, that Beria conducts, it's like, you laugh because the movie portrays it as absurd, and you kind of go, oh, because you're like, that's sick. Well, you know, not sick in like the rad way, sick in the twisted way. Like, I
think it really like punctures your bubble a little bit when you hear them read out the crimes, and they start with 327 counts of rape.
Yeah, and they start listing the names and ages of the girls.
Yeah,
the girls like
that absolutely terrifying. Because he goes like, "Oh, children as young as 7." Ugh. Whoa.
Yeah.
Let alone the fact that he was like a murderer and torturer, but like the fact that you see him in these scenes and he takes like this sadistic joy in causing people pain and making them squirm and stuff. It's like, oh, wow.
Yeah,
that is
a monster.
Terrifying.
Yeah.
Like, again, if we're comparing like Nazi villains, Dr. Mengele
Yeah.
in the concentration camps,
Yeah.
who was experimenting on people. When I envision what this person is like, I see a guy who doesn't see his subjects as human.
Definitely, yeah.
And he's carrying out these experiences out of a clinical fascination. When you see Beria, on the other hand, it's sadistic. Like he's taking joy out of that pain.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, it goes without saying that there were Nazis who enjoyed what they were doing.
Of course, yeah. I mean, actually, a great book on this is Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. It is a philosophical book, but it's also describing his experiences in the concentration camps. And he does go into this idea that, like, if you create this scenario, some of the people in the scenario are going to be sadists.
Right.
Who enjoy inflicting pain, enjoy the pain of others. That's the people who stick around in the camps while everyone else gets reassigned. Beria, I feel like, is one of these sadists who floated to the top.
Yeah.
And then his mean jokes were funny to Stalin because Stalin's also probably kind of a sadist.
Oh, yeah.
I wonder what Stalin was like in the beginning. At least if you're looking at the history, you see a young picture of Stalin, you're like, oh, this guy looks like a dashing hero.
Yeah.
And then you hear that he was a bank robber.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, so it's kind of cool. And then
he's for sure an interesting figure because, like, when the revolution happens and Lenin becomes the leader of the Soviet Union, Stalin is not like his number 2 man.
Yeah.
Stalin's just a dude that works for him.
He's just in the background.
He's like high up, but he's
one of the revolutionaries.
But he's not like.
It makes sense that he's the most charismatic of these bandits.
Right.
Right? But if you look at Lenin's circle with like Trotsky and all that, they were intellectuals.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So like Stalin doesn't necessarily fit in with the intellectuals.
But in Lenin's one of his last orders was make sure Joseph Stalin doesn't do anything.
Yeah, it doesn't, get out of hand.
Take over.
That's almost immediately what happens.
Yeah. Because clearly that's another interesting thing, because I feel like, at least in my circles I run in my media I consume, it's like, and in this movie too, kind of, the Soviets are kind of portrayed as a little bit bumbling, a little bit like a bloated bureaucracy, right? Yeah. And like I said before, in comparison to the precise accuracy, like surgical accuracy of the Nazis, right? But I feel like Stalin's not a moron, because he got to where he was in a situation where people not wanting him to do that, like. Yeah. Well, my theory of history is that the biggest gangster gets to the top. Right. That's always true. Right. And then the cases where it doesn't appear to be true, it's because that person is a figurehead and there's bigger gangsters behind them. I look at someone like, let's think about it. Genghis Khan. Yeah. Genghis. Right? Yeah. Biggest gangster. Biggest gangster. Caesar, biggest gangster. Octavian after him, biggest gangster. If you look in modern history, after the fall of the Soviets, who comes to the top? Vladimir Putin, biggest gangster. Yeah. Even in states, a lot of these presidents had to prove that they were willing to be the biggest gangster. What did Obama do the second he got into office? Drone strikes. Right. Yeah. Biggest gangster. Right away. It's always true out of everywhere. If that person is not the biggest gangster, then there is a vacuum of power waiting behind them, or there is something behind them that is propping them up. Is Joe Biden the biggest gangster? Hey, he's got a sweet Corvette. You see too many clips of him falling off of bicycles and stuff. The people behind him, big gangsters. Hillary Clinton, giant gangster. So, if Stalin died today, talking about Peanut and Harambe, if Stalin died today, what would the memes be like, do you think? It's interesting. You know what's interesting? In our lifetimes, Fidel Castro passed away. Yeah, that's crazy. Big gangster. Big gangster. Big gangster. Leader of Cuba till the day he died. Yeah. I remember assuming that he like retired and passed on the role. No. But he was in charge. He was in charge the whole time. And now his brother's in charge. Yeah. Who's also probably 1 billion years old. There was this hilarious Mike Tyson's Mystery episode where they bring Mike Tyson and his gang in. Yeah. They're like, so this whole communism thing, not really working out, but we don't want to admit we're wrong. Is there a way we could shift out of it? And they're like, obviously Mike's not paying attention, but it's like kind of hilarious to think that like they're acknowledging it a little bit. Yeah.
Because if you look at like the biggest communist society in the world, China, ended up having to adopt capitalist systems to sustain their economy.
I mean, there has been no true communist state.
It doesn't last long.
And it doesn't last long because people are greedy, I would say.
It takes a lot of death to finally put up the red flags.
Yeah.
Just to realize that the red flags don't work. It's exactly like what happened with Mao. Killed a lot of people.
Yeah.
It got really, really bad.
Yeah.
And then after Mao, they're like, maybe a little bit capitalist.
Yeah.
They have to adjust.
And look at China now. They're ruling. They're rocking it, you know? Like.
Yeah, I mean, they're doing great.
Yeah.
At least, you know,
Yeah.
by whatever scale. But, I mean, if you want to see somebody who's, like, working towards it and not doing awesome, like a country that is slipping closer to communism and as a result not doing well, Venezuela. I have friends who've just come back from, like, who went to Venezuela at the time that it was...
I thought you were gonna be edgelord and say Canada for a second.
No, well...
That's long gone.
It's too close to home. We're already deep into the communist society. Don't say anything bad about Trudeau.
No.
Okay? I don't want to get
persecuted.
persecuted.
I would never.
Canadian gulags could be rough.
Yeah.
But
Venezuela.
There's a lot of moments in the film
Yeah.
where the Soviet committee, they're like trying to interpret symbols and being like, which of us can interpret it the most generously and the most loyally.
Yeah.
Like Stalin, he's, you know, had a stroke.
Yeah.
He's like half paralyzed and he points and like his finger points at a picture and they're like, it's a picture of some lady trying to feed a goat some milk, and he's pointing at the lamb. He's saying, "I'm the lamb." No, he's the milk, or the milk is socialism. He's and we're the lamb.
Yeah, get him some milk.
Someone just goes, maybe you're the tit."
This movie is just so full of little jabs like that.
Yeah.
Where a character will just say, like, the dialogue is so
sharp.
Quick,
very quick,
and sharp, and it's like there's not really a wasted word.
No.
Yeah, it's really well done and well performed too. The actors do such a good job. Steve Buscemi's hilarious. Yeah.
I really like the part where another instance of like the symbolism thing is Barry is really upset at everybody, and of course you all are gonna, you know, get in the problem, and then they're arguing to be like, you all. No, he didn't point at me. He pointed at you all. Yeah. He said you all, like motioning around.
I was over there. Yeah.
There's a lot of those moments of like that kind of thing. I thought it was really interesting the anger that they had about like which one of you guys slipped up and invited the priests, because religion is under heavy persecution in communist Russia.
Yeah,
the Russian Orthodox Church, which has existed for a long time, even at the time of the Tsar, and they kept him around barely. Mm-hmm. And then they're very upset that these priests have showed up at Stalin's funeral, and they're trying to figure out who did it. And it was Barry who did it, because it was another one of Barry's moves to be like, look, I'm showing that I'm nice and accepting of the public, even though I'm a monster. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's also lots of other bumbling moves to be like, I want that original girl from the picture with Stalin.
Yeah. It's
not
so...
clicking in your head that she's like an adult now. Yeah.
But then they obviously can't find her, but they find a girl that looks like it could be her.
Yeah.
It's like, what? She's too old.
Because of how much they had to like worry about creating that impression of symbolism. Like even Jeffrey Tambor's character is like, I just need you, when I'm talking to you, I need you to nod. Just start nodding like I'm saying something important. So people are looking to me for... You know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, I wonder what like people actually thought of the Soviet Union. Like in your heart of hearts, what did you think? These people, you know? I watched Shogun recently.
I just started it.
Yeah. And one of the things that they explain in Shogun is this Japanese concept of the eightfold fence, where you're always going to have to perform to some degree.
Right.
You're always going to have to keep your opinions to yourself. Mm-hmm. You're always going to have to be polite in one way or be cordial in another. Mm-hmm. So inside yourself, you build this eightfold fence, and you guard your heart of hearts. Mm-hmm. You never let that inside self be compromised or known. You protect your true self, no matter how much you have to perform or lie or whatever. Your truth of who you are is inside that.
Right.
And I wonder if the same thing was kind of true of the people in Russia during that time. I can't tell everyone that this communist idea is really bad.
Yeah.
That it's clearly not working.
Yeah.
There were parts of it. Another great movie that takes place around this period of Russia, Child 34 or Child 44. It's a movie starring Tom Hardy, where Tom Hardy plays the Russian soldier who managed to plant the communist flag on top of the Reichstag.
Nice, yeah.
And it's his life after that, where he's now kind of an NKVD officer,
right.
and he's investigating a murder, and you're following him as he investigates this murder. And the whole time that he's out there, like, everybody is holding their tongues, even at a point where his wife confesses to him, I married you because I was scared. Because you're an officer. An officer came up to me in the park and I couldn't get him to go away. And then you kept following up with me and I had no choice but to pursue this until I ended up marrying you. Wild.
Terrifying.
Because that's one of those things that's like in your heart of hearts.
Yeah.
You can never really let anybody know who you are.
No.
Yeah. And there's a scene in it where they're like, the crops aren't growing. That's because this idea that the communist scientists came up with, they came up with it because it was communist, not because it was working.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're like, oh, we don't like this idea that, if it's not the power of the union or the collective strength of something.
Yeah, there's a scene in this movie, in The Death of Stalin, where the doctors are like messing with some equipment.
Yeah.
And they're like, what's that? It's a ventilator. Did you use it? No, it's made in America.
Yeah, we can't use it.
And like, and then Khrushchev's like, we need to destroy that if word ever gets out that machine was even in this building. It's like,
yeah, put it away.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of that stuff. I like the idea that, like, even the doctors, when they're presenting their answer for something, they're like, we collectively looked at it and unanimously decided, like, they have to pose as a group rather than as an individual. If an individual sticks out, that individual ends up on a list.
I remember when you and I were in Berlin. Yeah. It was fascinating seeing, like, the difference between East and West.
I tell everyone about it. Yeah. Every time I'm like, oh, you want to go to the West side? East side? Not that awesome. No.
But in the East side, they have the TV tower. Do you remember that? They're really tall. It's like a point with a ball at the top. Yeah. And they built it to, like, show off to the West Berlin side that, look, we can do stuff, we can build stuff. And it was supposed to be like this mighty sign that the communists had power, basically, right? But then it came out, like, years later that the steel used to build it was American steel. Somehow.
Amazing.
They imported it and then don't tell anyone.
Yeah. There's a show on Netflix now called Cleo, and it follows basically a murder mystery investigation following a Stasi intelligence officer named Cleo.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the things I thought was really interesting that was illustrated by the show is that the main character, Cleo, genuinely, despite the circumstances that landed her trying to investigate a murder and that she ended up falsely in prison, she still, in her heart of hearts, believes that communism works and it's the best way. Right. Despite the fact that as soon as the wall came down, the first thing everybody rushed to do was music, rock and roll, blue jeans, hamburgers. Yeah. It immediately falls apart. Like, what's the first thing that America does when they get to the other side? McDonald's. We're putting a McDonald's right. It's like, that is the best way to just know that you've been conquered by America, is that there's suddenly a Dairy Queen on your block. That was one of the things that, like, it was always so funny to think about, that, like, as soon as the soldiers landed and Desert Storm started up and they were fighting in Iraq, they put an Orange Julius, like, right in the middle of it. It's like, that was, to hear that that's one of the memories that, like, a U.S. Marine has, is getting an Orange Julius in Iraq.
We did it.
That's it.
We did it.
Clearly victory was reached.
That's
Saddam never stood a chance.
Planting the flag on the moon,
it's just, he's taken right away. So it makes me wonder, like, when I see these guys, the committee themselves, do they all think communism works?
Yeah, I wonder, because
if we're going down the list, Molotov clearly does.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that, like, you gotta wonder what kind of man he is, though, when he's like, oh, your wife got accused of it, she's guilty. Even afterwards when they say, like, she's not guilty, she was fine. No, she's guilty.
I would say that they're probably just behaving like any person would. Like power corrupts and absolute power corrupts, absolutely. The idea that, like, they're taking advantage of the system they're in. Whether or not they believe it, they're going to use the system, you know?
Yeah. It's interesting. I saw I was just reading some comments on, like, on a political post or something, and people immediately, they were, like, descended into arguing over what kind of future they wanted to live in. And somebody was like, oh my god, if you don't vote for Trump, we're going to be stuck with Kamala, and we're all going to imagine telling your children what happened when you're eating the bugs and living in the pod. And then this other anarchist person commented on their post, and they said, if you were strong-willed, you'd be dead way before then. And that was like, it made me wonder, I think what happens is that if you kill all the people who are actually strong-willed, you just end up with everyone who either kowtows or believes it right away. You have no dissent. You've eliminated all the dissent. So what you are left with is people who are weak-willed or strong-willed and agree with you.
Right. Yeah.
And even the ones who are strong-willed and agree with you, eventually you look at them and you go, that's a threat.
Yeah.
And you eliminate them too.
Totally.
Until all you end up with is weak-willed and incompetent people. It's the problem with, like, the Soviet Union was experiencing, is nobody wanted to stick out. So you were stuck having to obey some level of mediocrity the whole time. Yeah.
And, like, the scene where they're passing motions in the committee at the beginning, first half of the movie, and someone suggests a motion, and they'll vote, and just slowly, one by one, they all put up their hands.
It's like the motion passed, you waiting for the last guy, unanimously.
Exactly.
Because they can't appear to be out of step with each other. It has to be unanimous. Yeah. Despite the fact that it's a vote.
Yeah. Yeah. But as soon as a vote goes through that they disagreed with, now all of a sudden they're on the bottom.
Yeah.
They have to all be on the winning side.
Yeah. They have to be unanimous.
Yeah.
In their emotions.
Yeah.
Or, like, to kind of follow up on that note, it's like when you look at the mediocrity thing is evident as soon as they start looking for a good doctor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say an interesting parallel there would be with Germany, because they had Dr. Heisenberg working on their nuclear weapon. And first of all, they didn't fund him nearly to the same extent that the United States funded the Manhattan Project, because they couldn't.
Yeah.
But also, the Manhattan Project had so many incredibly intelligent Jewish scientists working on it.
Yeah.
And Heisenberg was not allowed to use
anything,
quote, Jewish math, unquote.
Yeah.
Which is like, he can't use Einstein and anything Einstein came up with.
That's gotta be so challenging.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that it's like Einstein's discovery of general relativity is like what started to prompt a lot of scientific community towards that atomic science.
But then Heisenberg still has to be making progress, or else they'll kill him and replace him, you know? It's like...
Yeah. Well, I don't think they would have killed him. They just
probably not. They would have.
He's still very useful.
Yes.
To them. And Heisenberg, in his own right, was like an incredibly brilliant dude.
Yeah.
Like the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, when you read it, is like, oh wow, you're the guy who came up with this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He probably, with the funding and freedom, he probably would have invented the device they needed. Just watch The Man in the High Castle.
Well, yeah, apparently he was like really close
to
figuring it out. And it was Heisenberg's work on that prompted the OSS to be like, oh, we need a solution.
Right.
You know? We need to figure this out faster than they do.
Yeah. I mean, the Allies thought that the Nazis were like right on, like...
Yeah, they thought the Nazis were much closer to it than they were. Yeah.
So I would say that's an interesting parallel, is like the idea that the doctors are gone because they weren't loyal to the party.
Yeah.
So
or because, they looked at somebody's wife.
Exactly, yeah. It's like what makes the party supposedly strong weakens it, and the same thing happened in Nazi Germany. I would say it's probably very similar in lots of authoritarian regimes, where it's like...
Oh, yeah. One other thing, one of the things that you notice really quickly is that, like any bureaucratic institution, they end up making work.
Yeah.
Once they've gotten rid of all the actual enemies of communism, they have to start accusing people of being enemies. Otherwise, there's no enemies left, and there's no work for them. And at worst, they get looked at as the enemies. So you have to start making things up at a certain point. The other way is like thinking about things in the communist context of them, is that if you, like, one of the things that comes out in Child 44 is he's talking about, the crimes of murder or the crimes of pedophilia, which is, one of the things that's happening on there, that these kind of dark crimes, they're a disease of capitalism. They don't exist here. So you're not allowed to investigate someone for pedophilia because you're admitting that exists here as a disease of capitalism, despite the fact that somebody could literally just be doing that. It's like you're not allowed to report that. Probably why Barry didn't get caught. For a lot of it. For other reasons too, because he's got papers.
Exactly.
What moment sticks out to you the most? Like, when you were thinking about this movie, what is there a scene in mind?
The image that comes to my mind just whenever I think of this movie is Zukov coming in slow motion, throwing his jacket off.
That is one of the coolest moments.
I don't know. I think Beria's execution comes to mind, and I remember really laughing so hard the first time I saw the movie when Stalin's son comes in and it's like, ask the doctor, how old are you? And the doctor's like, old. You're not old. Looks at the other one. You're not even a person. You're a ball sack. You're a testicle. That really is just like a weird looking guy.
Yeah, it's just a weird looking guy. It's really funny. Like, Vasily in the movie was actually, Rupert Friend nailed that character a lot. It's funny, like, when he comes into the movie, he's pretending that a plane crash that killed their hockey team did not happen because there's no way Soviet planes could crash. It's exactly the same thing. It's like, this is a disease of capitalism. Our system is perfect. Just don't acknowledge its flaws, right? And then at the same time, because of that happening, nobody knows what to blame for the fact that their hockey team sucks.
I would say the movie's not for everyone, but I would give it like an 8.5 or a 9.
The thing, it's all dark humor. I think one of my favorite parts of it isn't even like a comedic part. It's when they're finally burning Beria's body and Khrushchev just loses it. Just goes, I will bury you. And like, history will not remember you. You were fuck you, burn in hell. It's like, I really like that moment because it's like the whole time you're thinking these are all bureaucrats and they're all trying to stay tight-lipped. As soon as Barry is dead, you see this switch flip of Khrushchev and he comes out as like, I'm the monster now.
Totally.
And that's really funny. It's like they do end the movie on just the perfect note to be like, a few years later, he was replaced by that guy. Brezhnev.
And it shows him looking down at Khrushchev, plotting.
And Brezhnev was replaced by Gorbachev. Gorbachev lost it. Next person to step up was Putin. Putin's still around.
Crazy.
They never really lost that.
No.
Because like the stories you hear about Russia now, or it's all oligarchs, and they're still forming alliances to be who's going to be in charge. And Putin's is again the biggest gangster. So he's got them. But they're all trying to align and see like who's going to take over after Putin. He's got a nice house. Just saying, he's got a nice big house.
I think it's crazy that we speak about the Cold War like it's over.
No, it's still very
The Soviet Union collapsed, but it's like, and Russia is not the competitor to the United States that the Soviet Union was, but it's still a threat and it's still like there.
Call of Duty Black Ops 6 came out a little while ago. And crazy. One of the things that like they're driving is like the Soviet Union might not be around, but that just means our enemy is even more dangerous because they're less defined. Like, well, maybe you're looking for enemies. So maybe you're looking to pick a fight, guys. But it's interesting to see. It's like the United States as the Western power still needs adversaries, so they have kind of a rival with China, and they're trying to pick an enemy with Russia. At least like one of the Democrat Party is often trying to do that. It's like, I think if we're talking about foreign policy, like Trump's strategy was, I'm going to make friends out of them, or at least I'm going to go over there and define our relationship rather than let it be this ephemeral thing that we can villainize.
Right.
But I guess, we'll find out what happens. Tomorrow, hopefully. With
tomorrow morning, we'll wake up and...
I don't know what to give this movie out of 10. I just know that I really enjoyed it.
It's a hard movie to give a rating because it's not for everyone.
No. It's not something I would tell my mom to watch.
No.
Or like, he wouldn't recommend it. It's rated what it is. But it's entertaining.
Yeah.
I thought it was very fun to watch. And it's also like, it makes you kind of grateful that, we don't live in that. You know?
Yeah. To quote Winston Churchill, democracy is the worst system there is, except for all the others.
That's an interesting, except for all the others. That is a really good point there, too. Well, to once again quote Beria, show me the podcast, I'll show you the dwindling subscriber base.
Wow.
That's us at the Forest Creek. You can help us not dwindle by subscribing at the Forest Creek. Share it with all your friends. Share it with your political enemies. Who knows? That'd be fun to get somebody accused of, like, you were a subscriber to the Forest Creek. We hereby accuse you of conspiring against the Union. You can accuse them by pointing them to at the Forest Creek on social media and your podcasting platforms. Apple Podcast coming soon. We got more interesting shows lined up, especially for the rest of the year. Chance will be back.
Oh, I'll be back.
I might have other episodes with you released before you're back.
Yes.
But we are coming back for our traditional Christmas episode. I'm looking forward to that.
It'll be our third one.
Yeah. It's like
crazy.
Pretty excited about that. We got a lot of fantastic new shows coming. We are theforestcreek.ca, where you can also check out our services. Maybe it's right for your business. And if you want to get in touch with us, theforestcreek@gmail.com. I'm Comrade Raph.
Comrade Chekhov Fustowski.
До свидания.